Claire remembered the times before. Loyalty, determination, and courage. Those were the words I heard even before I knew their meanings. They are the 4 essential qualities needed to have a mind as sharp as a sword. This is the creed of the Keen Mind family, and I truly believed that I would follow this sacred doctrine regardless of the circumstances. How foolish I was, she suddenly realized. She didn't know what kind of magic the enemy had used to break the barrier, but now was the perfect opportunity to counterattack. So why wasn't her body moving? A professor stepped forward and told the students to clear the way. Professor Gary anxiously said to Professor Grandier, "Your wound." He replied, "The barrier has finally been broken. We cannot waste this opportunity." Hearing this, Professor Gary agreed and moved forward to counterattack alongside him. Claire looked at the 2 professors and thought, do they really think they can defeat Rainf now? Why do they keep marching to their deaths like this? She thought they were fools. Then Curtis and the others approached her and called out, "Claire, what should we do?" She was astonished and asked, "Why are you asking me?" Curtis said, "Because you are the captain of the discipline committee. We are ready to follow your orders." She worriedly thought, we can't just let the professors fight alone. But why do we have to risk our lives? Through her thoughts, she felt truly selfish. As the captain of the discipline committee, a leader tasked with protecting the lives and safety of the academy students, having such thoughts was unacceptable. She stammered, "Aye." Then she looked at her struggling teammates and saw Professor Gary turning back to smile at her. She recalled her childhood values of humility, loyalty, determination, and courage. All those memories awakened her, giving her the motivation to fight. She shouted, "Those who are injured or scared, stay back. The rest of us will fight for our honor." The leader approached and grabbed Lucas's shoulder, saying, "There will be some changes in the plan. I will return first. I expect you to follow us through the gate immediately after handling these fools and discarding this trash." The cloaked minions were finishing up. The people they had chained were told to stand. Lucas grabbed the leader's shoulder and asked, "Why did you bring that thing along?" He didn't answer, causing Lucas pain. The minions said they were ready, sir. He turned and told Lucas, "Don't disappoint me." The professors quickly rushed towards him and shouted, "Draniv, you're not going anywhere. You won't escape." But Lucas blocked the professors. He used his technique and yelled, "Annoying pests, die." Professor Gary shouted back, "Is that all you've got?" The henchmen advanced to support Lucas in killing all the professors. Professor Gary felt helpless. Damn it, I can't fend them all off. But fortunately, the brave students stepped up to fight, protect the hostages, and support the professors. Worried for them, Professor Gary said, "What are you doing? Get out of here. It's dangerous." Claire replied, "This is our battle too. Professor Gary, you taught us this, didn't you?" She warned them to be careful. Among the crowd, Claire recognized someone. Wait, that! How dared he? How could he?" She shouted angrily and charged at him. "Kay, how would you do this to us? To Faye? To Doradria? No, we can't let him get away." Seeing her teammates rushing towards her, she wondered what they were saying. Why are they coming towards me? They should be chasing Kay. She had been injured and turned to tell everyone. Chase after Kay. She felt the pain and looked down to find a sharp object lodged in her. She wondered, how did this get here? Curtis shouted, "Hang in there. We'll save you." Suddenly, everyone turned towards Lucas, who was burning and lifting a professor. He looked in a direction, and everyone followed his gaze. Claire saw it and smiled with relief. Someone was approaching the battle, and it was none other than Althal and his contract beast, a dragon. Finally, he appeared to join the battle. Two horns, like two gleaming swords, grew from each side of its head, with their sharp points glinting in the light. Its crystal scales shimmered with a mysterious black hue, so dark that its shadow seemed gray. Its eyes blazed with intelligence and brutality, enough to make even a veteran explorer stand paralyzed with fear. But what was just as terrifying as the dragon was the boy standing beneath it. He made her heart tremble with fear. Each step he took exuded a confidence that was not easily noticeable but impossible to shake. Every inch of his body radiated an unbridled rage so intense that Claire's only regret was not being able to see Lucas's defeated face in the final moment. The professors were all gravely injured. Lucas thought about enhancing his processing abilities, awareness, and reflexes to cast higher-level spells. With a mana source like his, Nearly limitless, he could draw and use it freely. With the elixir he possessed, he had escaped the mundane world, and these so-called elites were now nothing more than ants to him. But why did his insides feel like they were being gripped and twisted by a cold, sharp claw? Lucas spoke. Altho's pet, you arrived just in time for the party. Do you think that oversized lizard can help you? Even the esteemed professors of this academy can't touch me. If you think you can. Altho, ignoring his words, moved past him and approached Tessia, who lay injured nearby. The henchmen were quite fearful at this point, saying, "That's a dragon, right? I can't handle Altho's attitude." Lucas was furious at being ignored by Altho. Altho knelt down to check Tessia's pulse. It seemed she had been drubbed, but aside from some bruises and scratches, she was okay. Lucas turned to Altho and said, "She screamed your name. Did you know that? If you don't want me to touch your precious little princess, I don't think I will listen to him. Because what better way to break your spirit than to make you crawl on the ground, helplessly watching me break the limbs of the girl you care about the most?" Hearing this, Sylvie roared in anger. He thought Altho would be furious, but he was disappointed. "I said all that, and although still ignored me," he shouted angrily. "How dare you turn your back on me when I'm talking to you? You country bumpkin. I'll break every bone in your body so you can only cry when I humiliate Tessia." As he aggressively approached Altho, he suddenly felt the same sensation as before, as if a mad demon was twisting and clawing inside him. Why do I feel this way? Why does this presence scare me more than the esteemed professors of this school? Even more than my brother? At this moment, Altho finally responded to Lucas. "I see you as nothing more than a bee I can't be bothered to kill. But if that bee chooses the wrong sting, even the most sacred saint will crush it." Lucas felt even more pain as something tightly gripped his body. He painfully thought, "No, it shouldn't be like this. I should be stronger than him. How could a bug like him make me terrified?" He had killed countless legions of people and beasts to gain such bloodlust and oppression. "Get away from me," he shouted. Sylvie called out, "Father," although replied, "It's okay, Sylvie. Just protect Tessia for now." Although slowly walked toward Lucas. Lucas said, "You don't just hide fire techniques, do you? How can you use ice techniques too? No matter, take this." He used all his power to attack Altho, but Altho easily dodged every move. He was astonished. What the? And he cried out in pain, My arm. It hurts so much. Damn it, it hurts so much." He stammered, You also have lightning techniques? No way, you're an anomaly, aren't you?" Altho lifted his hand and said, "Yes, it's me." Using his power, he crushed Lucas's rotten arm. Lucas groaned in pain and said, "You can't do this. I'm Lucas Wykes." "You can't." Ignoring his words, Altho stepped on his leg and violently pressed down. Lucas screamed in agony. Altho asked, "You mentioned Drenive earlier. Is he the one behind all this?" Lucas replied, "That's right, and you know what else? He's captured that useless idiot you call your best friend. You've already lost, Altho. This world will change, and there's nothing you can do about it." "But wait, what are you doing?" Altho responded, "At least I can do everything in my power to ensure that trash like you won't contaminate future generations." Lucas, in great pain, begged Altho, "No, please don't do this. I'm sorry. I beg you, don't." Altho coldly replied, "May your suffering extend into the next life." It had been a long time since everyone had faced such a terrifying power, and their eyes were filled with fear, shock, and reverence. "I forgot how lonely this is," Altho thought, clutching his stomach in pain. Sylvie called out, "Father," and Lucas cried, "Brother." Suddenly, Altho was startled by a burst of power, revealing that Lance had appeared, seeing his brother being brutally killed. Byron, filled with rage, was about to attack Altho. Seeing the danger, Altho shouted, "Sylvie, get out of here." But it seemed too late. Altho and Sylvie were injured. Sylvie roared angrily at Lance. Altho stopped Sylvie, saying, "No, you can't fight them." Lance and his robots were helping the students escape. Altho thought, if only I could return to Phase 2. Byron, enraged, approached Altho and said, "People like you don't deserve to live after committing such atrocities against a member of the Wykes family, my brother Lucas." Byron was about to attack Altho when someone timely intervened, stopping him. "You must not touch him." This guy tortured and humiliated my brother before killing him, Byron's retorted. And you're telling me not to harm him? Do you want to oppose me too? This boy saved everyone from your brother. While I understand your loss, I suggest you be careful with your words when speaking to me. Saved everyone from Lucas? Don't test me. I'm not here to follow your orders. My brother just died before my eyes, and I'm simply retaliating against his killer, Byron's declared. Seeing that he couldn't stop Byron's, the man used his power to command 2 robots to restrain Byron's. Although Byron's broke free after a short struggle, his face was full of determination to attack Altho. Princess Serlin and Curtis were shocked and exclaimed, "No." Fortunately, a girl from Lance intervened just in time, saying, "Byron's, you are not the one to make decisions here. The council will decide what to do with this boy and the dragon. You are not allowed to disobey orders." Reluctantly, Byron's accepted, saying, "Understood." At this moment, the students were able to run outside to meet their families. They embraced each other with joy and tears, while others frantically searched for their loved ones. Medical staff arrived at the scene to provide first aid and treatment, either on the spot or back in their quarters. Someone was bandaging Althel's arm when the girl from Lance approached and asked, "Do you need further medical attention?" Althel replied, "No, I'm just out of mana." She pulled out something resembling handcuffs and said, "Then you'll have to wear these." No resistance. Altho extended his hand for her to put them on. She said, "Although I don't think you can break them," and then took out a golden circular object, aiming it at Altho. "I also don't think you can escape. I understand, but can you do the same for my beast, so it can be more comfortable?" Altho asked. She looked at Sylvie and asked, "Is this dragon your beast?" Altho told Sylvie that she should return to her fox form. She replied, "Even if we fight, we can't defeat them. But I still choose to listen to my father." She then transformed back into her fox form and ran towards Altho, calling out, "Dad, Dad, what are we going to face?" "I'm not sure, Sylvie. But don't worry. We'll be okay," the girl said. "Follow me to the wizard's camp while we wait for further instructions from the council." Nearby, people murmured, "I heard he killed a student from the noble Wykes family. But wasn't he part of the Wykes themselves, the terrorist group?" "Yeah, that's right. But how did he kill him? He's not one of Cyrus's people, remember." Although listened to these discussions while walking. Even when something like that happened, people only spread rumors. Then Altho heard a call. Looking in that direction, he saw his family. His mother worriedly ran up to him and called her son. Altho asked the girl, "Can I talk to my family?" She agreed. Byron's asked angrily, "After everything, how could he?" Someone nearby reassured Byron's and said, "Listen to all sides first. The boy just did what was necessary, so don't let emotions cloud your judgment." Altho approached his family to talk, separated only by an iron gate. "Son, you're making your parents worry again, aren't you?" "It's just a misunderstanding, so don't worry, Mom." His mother anxiously asked, "What happened in there? Why were you handcuffed?" "I'm fine, Mom. Nothing serious happened." "Of course, so just worry about everyone when I'm not around." "Mom, is there anything we can do?" Altho held his mother's hand and said, "I'll be fine because I'm your son." The ring on Lance's hand emitted a sound. A nearby man said, "The council must have already made their judgment." In her hand appeared a parchment, and she called out to Altho, "Please listen." Upon hearing this, Altho released his mother's hand and walked over. She opened and read aloud, "By the authority granted to me by the Decadent Council, I, General Varay of the Hex Church, declare that Altho Lewin, son of Reynold Lewin and Alice Lewin, has been decreed due to his excessively violent actions and involvement in unspecified situations. His mana core will be sealed, his title as a mage revoked, and he will be detained pending further judgment. This order is effective immediately." Upon hearing this, Altho showed no reaction other than a sad glance and a downcast face. "It's so unfair to pass judgment like this," he thought to himself. "I punished a noble like Lucas, but he's cruel and harmed many innocent people. If I hadn't intervened, how many more would have perished?" All professors and students rushed to attack Lucas to save everyone from danger, but only Altho could do so. He punished the evil doer, and now he had to endure this unjust judgment. Where is the justice? Everyone discussed what was happening. What's exploding there? Did he really kill someone? Why are students being imprisoned? Altho's mother felt sorrowful upon hearing her son being detained. His father exclaimed, "My son, he can't have. General Varay must have made a mistake. This is madness. He saved us. He deserves better than this." Many argued passionately about the situation. Princess Serlin felt outraged and shouted, "How dare you? How dare you punish the only one who did the right thing? We wouldn't have survived without Althal of the Hex Church to rescue us." When his parents learned of this decree, they would surely overturn it immediately. Lance calmly presented the parchment to Princess Serlin and said, "Take a look." The king and Queen Glader supported this decision, along with King Shibation and Queen Shibation. Princess Serlin was surprised. "No way. They would never have stopped me with an arm behind the time," Curtis admitted. "If the judgment is approved by the ruling figures of the two kingdoms, then it is futile to argue with the Hex Church. It's overly violent, no context. It seems like I'm behind this attack after all." Altho spoke up. "May I speak with my family one last time before you take me away?" She agreed, and he'd approached his family. To ease their worries, he smiled and said, "Don't be sad like this. This misunderstanding will be cleared up soon. I'm sure of it, Dad. Mom, I don't know what lies ahead for me, but seeing you, little sister." He gently rubbed her head. "You've grown so fast. I only wish I had more time by your side." He comforted her and wiped away her tears. "I'll only be gone for a while. I promise. Altho, son, no matter what happens, whatever they say, your family will always be by your side. Remember to come home to us." Hearing the words and feeling his family's concern touched Altho deeply. Byron glanced at him with resentment, then carried his sister's body back. Others went their separate ways. Upon returning home, everyone greeted their Lord Byron's, who entered the main house. He angrily kicked the door. The maid, unaware of what had happened, cheerfully greeted him. "Welcome home, Lord Byron's." Yes, indeed a surprise. "We didn't expect you to return." But their joy didn't last long as the smile faded from the girl's lips when she saw Byron's holding something. He was furious and immediately called for his father. After a while, he reached his father's location. After learning what had happened, he angrily spoke out, "That guy is a disgrace to our family. To erase that shameful act, I did everything for that wretch. Every teacher, every monster core, every vial of elixir became wasted because of you. Why did you bring him back here after failing to avenge our family's honor? You come to disgrace my evening in my house with the body of that useless fool." His father intended to slap him, but he calmly restrained his father's hand and said, "Father, please restrain yourself. I'm still a member of the church. How could I forget? Ever since you've been so arrogant. But you get to stay in the church just because you're part of our family. Don't forget that." He became calmer and then asked, "So what happened?" He recounted everything to his father according to the testimonies. Lucas was terrorizing the school along with a group led by someone named Dranive. He clenched his fists in anger and said, "That brat brutally killed Lucas. He said it himself. We'll act before Adeline." Upon hearing a girl's call, she opened the door and said, "Yes, sir." He wrote a letter to the council that very evening, detailing the unfortunate attack on Xyrus, our beloved son, Lucas, under Dranive's control. There was certainly no choice but to obey him or lose his life. How could a young boy be forced to make such a decision? Just thinking about it is heartbreaking. But our beloved son, a victim, suffered a cruel death at the hands of such a despicable and unforgivable person. He's unworthy to continue living in our society. There's no greater remorse than death, which may be more fitting for such a heinous crime that harmed our family. As we prepare a solemn funeral for our precious son, I hope the council will reach a just decision." After finishing, he asked, "Is this statement accurate, Byron's?" He nodded. The secretary finished writing the letter for the council and bowed. "I extend my condolences to you. I'll send this immediately." Byron's asked his father, "What about the funeral?" His father replied dismissively, "Adeline can handle it. Now let me be at peace. I can't understand how that family could have a brother like him who did something so cruel, harming so many people. Yet they still strive to protect him, even though their own son is entirely at fault. Why don't they think about their son's wrongdoings that harmed so many? Do they not understand, or do they deliberately ignore it? Even Lance Byron's, who's a church member and protects the safety of all the people in Dickon, why would he defend a sibling who's done such foolish things?" Now a good person like Althal has to endure all the frustration. I hope the council's hasty judgment can deliver a fair decision as soon as possible. After his father agreed to follow his plan, Byron's fulfilled his wish. He bowed to his father and left, although was walking with Lance to somewhere. He asked, "Can I ask how much farther we have to go?" Lance replied, "Not far. We're almost there." Although raised his hand and said, "You don't need to handcuff me. I'm not stupid enough to try to escape from the two church people in midair. Most of it is because we're flying over monster forests. Can you figure out a way to bother us? You're in the church, and you have the mana demon that you can't deal with. How can the church be strong? But we're just human. The forest of monsters holds too many secrets. Surprisingly, I think you already know that, and with strange things happening, it's never too careful." After saying that, he suddenly wondered what he was doing. Saying all this to a boy. He asked an 8-year-old boy. "I thought I was a prisoner." He smiled and replied, "Then you could be both," although discouraged, and said, "From what I've seen so far, I guess it's better for me to go with two people." He agreed to that, and told him he was right. Vare and Byrons are not talkers, so ask me a question. How did you become such a good wizard? Although surprised to ask, well, he has never seen me fight. So why do you think I'm a good wizard? Because I've heard Byrons talk about his younger brother, and from the students I've talked to, I understand that enough. Why do I need to watch you fight? Really, I want to know what you've heard from them, considering that you're still escorting me to prison. He said, "You're wrong. We're in a very different situation." All those sad eyes looked down on the scene below. Then the man walking with him said, "We're here." Then immediately a road to a cave appeared, and that made Althal very surprised, and the sound welcome to the council's flying castle. The three of them set foot there. The man said to Althal, "We always carry a lump of soil with us everywhere, especially when I can't take pieces of the wall and soil from this castle to use magic." He said, "We can't use magic at the castle entrance, so we'll go up the stairs." And then the three of them walked up the stairs for a while until they reached their destination. A bright door appeared right in front of them. The man warned the boy, "Now that we're in the castle, it's best not to talk to us or anyone in the church." Heeding the man's advice, Althal felt that this castle was very similar to one from his previous life, beautiful yet empty and lonely. They arrived before 3 kings and a queen. Vare bowed and said, "Your Majesty, we have brought Althal before the council." An angry, pompous old fat king said arrogantly, "Do you think you're equal to the church? At least kneel down." Althal looked towards Tessia's parents and apologized. "I was not taught how to show respect to nobility and royalty." The red-haired king raised his hand and said, "Enough, let's unshackle Althal so we can start obeying his Majesty's orders." She immediately unshackled Althal. Aluin said, "Before we start, I want to thank you not only as a leader but also as a father for saving the fat old king." Hearing that, the fat old king angrily shouted, "We're here as leaders of this damn continent. There's no father or son. This kid cut off a classmate before killing him. I don't think I need to thank you for that. Do I need to read his cruel report again?" The queen sitting next to the red-haired king intervened. "I don't think it's necessary." Both legs were crushed to half a thigh. The left hand was severed and burned. The groin and pelvic bones were crushed enough to scream, and Mom Tessia has already voiced their opinion. "We've all read the report, but we can't ignore the fact that he also saved the students of the Exiris Academy," said the old man. "He's right. This kid did save the whole school. But it doesn't justify the torment he put on the poor boy, Lucas. This can be used to take personal revenge." Chadist, angry, argued back. "So you mean Althal recklessly jumped into danger just for revenge, right? Even so, we can't prove that was his motive. But what we can clearly see is that he saved our children, and what remains of the academy." The queen sitting next to the fat old king raised her hand and said, "And that's why I object to killing this boy. We only need to use magic to disable him." The fat old king nodded. "Thank you. This boy is too dangerous. If he and his dragon want to confront us, what then?" The anger of the fat old man sounded unreasonable. Tessia's mother spoke up. "Oh dear, do you see how unreasonable you are?" She turned to ask the two next to her what they thought of the whole situation. Muriel, as both a parent and husband, agreed with her on this. The red-haired king said, "But as leaders, we also need to consider the council's viewpoint. They don't just think for themselves, but objectively for the whole continent." Tessia's mother said objectively, and Tessia's father angrily asked, "So what now?" "We'll disable him and kill the dragon, to prevent him from harboring revenge against us and deciding on a revenge plan." The fat old king and Tessia's father began to get angry and argue. The old man said he had to know his position. Chakest also replied, "We're not here to release accusations." The old man didn't give up and continued to speak. "Do you think you're equal to me just because you're sitting here? Does it need to be mentioned that you were powerless in managing the church? No, it doesn't need to be repeated." The queen heard this and spoke up. "What are you doing? You're being so unreasonable." The old man didn't intend to stop. "The continent stands on the brink of war, and you're so careless as to lose one of our greatest assets." Although stood below to cut the old man's words short and said, "I can, Your Majesty." The old man turned down a loud scream, saying, "You don't get to say unless I say. I refuse to accept any requests that this kid is trying to make." Chakest said, "You're acting too unreasonable and defiant." Although calmly continued, "Your Majesty, I find it pointless for me to stand here if I'm not allowed to speak or retell what happened, and why it happened like that." The queen sitting next to the old fat king raised her hand and said, "He's right. This prisoner doesn't need to be here. Put him in prison until new orders are issued and lock his beast in a cage." Chakest was angry. "This council isn't run by you two." The old fat king was angry and said, "Sit down. Remember that you only have one person in the church to support you. Listen to Tessia's father. If you have taken a step forward to near him, he has raised his hand to stop, and that ends the argument here." Altho was escorted to the prison cell. As he walked there, he thought about the entire argument he had witnessed earlier. On the way to the cell, he contemplated how both King and Queen Waff had opposed him, while King and Queen Glader didn't support either side. He was relieved that she was too exhausted to endure all of this, although felt like he had no choice but to rely on those two to get himself and Sylvie out of this without harm. And so he arrived at the prison. The man escorting him said, "Sometimes we'll come by to check on the kid. At least it's quiet here." Suddenly, a familiar voice asked, "Is that you, Altho?" Altho was surprised to hear it. The voice sounded so familiar, he couldn't place it. At the end of the previous section, right after Altho had been locked in his cell, he was very surprised to hear the voice of a woman. He approached the door to that voice. Principal Goodsky was there. According to Principal Goodsky, she had been imprisoned here for several days. She knew nothing about the attack on Osiris Academy. I recounted everything that had happened at her school, but I still can't understand why she was imprisoned by the council shortly after meeting them. Shortly after they met, Principal Goodsky thanked Altho. "I'm sorry for what you had to go through. I know you've already talked about this, but can you tell me a little more about what happened when you fought with Lucas?" Altho immediately recounted that he had used a type of drug that had recently appeared in the school, but it affected Lucas differently. He became much stronger, but remained conscious, or as conscious as he normally would. He could still tell what he was doing. Principal Goodsky was curious, asking, "But aside from fighting him, did you see how the leader looked? Why didn't he wait for me when I arrived? There are just a few things I need to confirm. But now, I think I understand. It was an inevitability that had to happen, but it happened much sooner than expected. They're executing the plan much faster than planned." Altho was surprised to hear her say that and immediately asked, "What do you mean it had to happen? And who are they?" The former principal remained silent, although seemed to be drawing a conclusion by now. "Madam Principal Goodsky," he said, "a conclusion that I hope is wrong." She replied slowly, "I'm no longer the principal. The council made me the scapegoat for them." "A scapegoat for what?" She sat in a dark corner and said, "That's why I'm in here. I suspect the council will blame me for the incident at the school to steer public opinion away. I can't speak. I'm afraid I'm forced to keep silent about what I know. Not willingly, but through force and magic. Both were irresistible. Even when I told you it hurt a lot and slowly activated the curse, Altho seemed quite angry. He gripped the iron bar of the door and cursed. Convenient, right? He continued to punch the iron bar with his injured hand. He slumped to the ground and said, "Thank you for your information." She helplessly apologized to Altho. The fat old man burst in and said, "What on earth?" The calm red-haired king poured wine and leisurely enjoyed it. The old man rushed in and said, "I thought we had an agreement. Why did you come so soon?" The red-haired king raised his hand and shook his head. He finished his wine and said, I know the agreement between us. Rest assured, you'll have my and my wife's vote, but you can't force me to make baseless accusations like that. Not with this kid who saved the future of this continent, including my son. He asked about the future generation, right? There wouldn't be any future generation if you didn't stand by my side. The king angrily slammed his hand on the table. If we want this continent to have a future, he continued, Althal and his spirit animal must return to him. That's the deal between us. The red-haired king continued pouring wine and said, I know what the agreement is. I don't need you to remind me every time you feel uneasy. Do you realize you and I are betraying the entire population? He arrogantly said betrayal. This continent is about to be destroyed. There won't be anyone to betray. Now we just have to save what's important to us. There's nothing right or wrong here. The red-haired king calmly said he wanted to deceive himself to sleep well. What we're doing is abandoning our people just to save our own lives. The old man replied, That's really helping us sleep well. Thank you very much. We'll live and serve him while getting rich and wise from his continent. The red-haired king asked, What about the people of this continent? We won't know what he'll do with the kingdoms of Sepen and down, let alone what Elsana will face. The old man argued, Fairies are always too fair, even with their own interests. Unlike us, they don't know what it's like to lead. Imagine, with his technology and wealth, what his eternal wealth could bring to the human land. Do you believe it's possible? It won't be a fantasy for us anymore. The red-haired king, angry, slammed the wine glass he held onto the table and said, Be quiet, don't lump me in with them. Following him is beneficial for my family only. He abandoned his own kind for his own benefit. Wealth and power. What about your people? Have you ever thought about what he'll do once he's here? There could be extinction, or if he's wise, he'll turn them all into slaves. But my wife's love for our children concerns me more than the entire kingdom of humans and what I've had to do to get to where I am. My responsibility is to preserve the glory of the Glader lineage. I hope my ancestors will forgive me for that. Seeing this, the old man left, regardless of the red-haired king sitting there looking sad. The red-haired king drank wine and pondered. The promised wealth doesn't mean anything to me. My only wish is to become the most powerful mage in Deceden, to make my ancestors proud. But I'm just a mediocre mage. Even with countless elixirs, I struggle to upgrade. I've invited my beloved wife and our child, but when I saw my father blinded by power, I swore I would never forget why I needed power to maintain peace and protect my family and people. But even now, with 2 people in the church, I can't erase my feelings of inferiority. Is it true that I made this decision for the safety of my family? Or, like him, I also crave power that he promised? The wine glass fell to the ground as the red-haired king lay down tiredly. His hand was bleeding from the shards of the wine glass. Perhaps the only thing greater than his magical power is the misfortune of the boy caught up in this conspiracy. Suddenly, he put his hand to his forehead and laughed, a big laugh that ended in a few short seconds. I'm sorry, kid. I want to believe that your sacrifice is for the good of this continent. Indeed, it's for something better that I've done. Suddenly, a dark and misty scene appeared. Where am I? Why are there so many crows? You cling tightly to the iron bar until your blood flows. What are they eating? From here, you can't tell. I have to climb higher to find out. Something isn't right. What's going on here? 4 human heads are impaled on the sharp iron bar. Suddenly, they turn around. They are the heads of your classmates from Tyrus Academy, including Princess Tessia. This scene is truly terrifying. Overcome with fear, you fall from above. Altho jolts awake, looking at his trembling hands. Thankfully, it was just a nightmare. While still shaking, a stern face enters and warns you not to speak, then hands you a letter. You take it and open it. The letter reads, Dear Althal, I fear the severity of this matter is deeper and more sinister than what is shown outwardly. You don't have much time. The council will soon announce that you and Good Sky are the perpetrators of the terrorist act. I overheard a conversation between King Glader and Dose. They intend to hand you over to someone alive. I have asked my father to take your family to a safe haven. You have done much for Tessia, but I apologize. For now, this is all I can do. Your sincere friend. As you finish reading the letter, it vanishes. You sit and contemplate when Byron approaches with a disdainful look and says the council is waiting for you. The 2 of you stand before the council's door. Byron leans against the wall with folded arms and says, I have been looking forward to this trial. After the person is imprisoned, I will ensure the safety of your family, just as you did for my younger brother. Althal, without trembling, replies that he wants to fight a 13-year-old child. Honesty grabs his collar and threatens, I don't think you understand. You're about to face something. Byron's, furious, throws him to the ground, accusing him unjustly to avenge his insane younger brother, who killed innocent students. He chose to participate in the attack. He chose to kill those students. He chose the side of darkness. Upon hearing this, Byron angrily throws Althal to the ground. The council doors open, and amid the refusal to answer, Good Sky is publicly sentenced to death. Hearing this, Althal is shocked. Good Sky is escorted out and comes face to face with Althal. The two meet, their eyes and faces filled with indescribable sadness. After her sentencing, it's Althal's turn. The chubby old man opens a scroll and reads aloud. Remember that the council shows mercy towards you, even though your actions warrant death in other circumstances. However, we have agreed that your actions were for the greater good. Therefore, your sentence shall be as follows. Althal is stripped of his title as mage and all associated rights. He will remain in custody until further notice. Do you have anything to say? Tessia's parents feel helpless, unable to do anything for Althal. Upon hearing the announcement, they are deeply saddened. Alvo asks, what does remaining in custody until further notice mean? We will monitor the victims of this incident and their families. Once the public forgets about this event, we will release you. Think of it as temporary detention rather than imprisonment. At this moment, Althal recalls the words Tessia's father said about someone intending to take him alive. Althal speaks up, I understand. That's somewhat acceptable. What about my familiar? The elderly woman sitting next to the chubby old man slams her hand on the table in anger and exclaims loudly, You're familiar. The council has been merciful in letting you live, and you still dare demand more. Tessia's father sadly informs Alvo that losing the rights of a mage means he can no longer keep his familiar. Alvo suppresses his anger by tightly holding his own hand, then calmly says, I understand, Your Majesty. The chubby old man reassures him, Don't worry, young one. Your familiar will be well taken care of. The council understands that a creature of its size requires a powerful mage to handle it. It will be well cared for. The red-haired king speaks up, instructing Byron, You may now escort him to the detention room, and remember to restrain him. As Byron escorts him to the cell, Althal reflects, I know the lances are still very pleased to be helpful. As soon as Byron arrived at the cell, he shoved Althal in without any mercy, and then turned to leave. As Byron departed, Althal remarked to himself, I know, even without these barriers, it wouldn't be so bad. He glanced around the stark white cell he had been led to. You should see the cell I used to be in. A man stepped out and replied, Looks like you were waiting for me. Althal turned back and said, Right on time. Winsome. Finally, the person known as the god had arrived. He had come to Althal's cell, holding Sylvie in his arms, who was asleep after the trial had ended. The chubby old man and his wife were delighted. Cheers, my dear. The madness is about to end. With a glass of wine in one hand and his wife draped over the other, he continued, Imagine everything unfolding as we planned. Together with our allies, we've chosen to lead this continent into a new era. His wife asked, How did you attain such power, my love? Long ago, he began, I fought terrifying mana beasts when it was just me and my axe. Those battles pushed me to the brink countless times, but nothing frightened me as much as him. When he first came to me, it felt like I was facing a deity. Yet, he chose us. He didn't need us to achieve his goals, but he chose us and later. They joke that the kings of this continent aren't as strong and skilled as their people. I was much stronger than them once. He continued, If it weren't for, almost revealing too much. He hesitated. Ah, yes, she doesn't know about that incident. The incident that nearly forced him to speak out. It's beyond the core now. I never expected my mana core to be permanently damaged. All because of a peasant mage who struck at my core. He caught me in bed with his wife. He didn't have many women to choose from, so he must have felt honored. Torture and execution couldn't make up for what happened to me. After thinking for a moment, he continued the conversation with his wife, sipping his drink while holding her close. His wife said, The incident that nearly forced you to speak out, what was the reason? He finished his wine and asked her to pour him another glass. "Sure, my love," she said, promptly refilling his glass. She added, "Oh, my love, I know our people respect you, but they only obey your orders. If not for the 2 in the 6 churches, they would have revolted and seized your throne long ago." She stroked his long, white beard and continued, "So it's simple. Just eliminate anyone daring to do such things. Because you have the 6 churches and their power, and now you have his support too." "Yes, you're right," he agreed. "More wealth, more magical abilities, more people worshipping us, and best of all, immortality to enjoy it all." She reminded him not to forget, then climbed onto him. He said, "Yes, the power to give birth." The 2 of them were intimately entwined on the chair at the height of their passion when an intruder dared to break in. Both of them were very angry. A tall man with white hair walked in and greeted him, holding the soldier he had subdued in his hand. He threw him to the ground and walked in slowly, apologizing for his intrusion. The chubby old man held his wife in his arms and angrily said, "How dare you? Do you know who I am?" The other calmly said, "I know," and something purple appeared on his forehead immediately. "You 2 are pests that I've been ordered to eliminate. When my king is in danger, I appear immediately to protect them. I apologize, Your Majesty and your Queen. The intruder won't escape." The man calmly said, "Spilling X blood is not what I want. I'm here only for the heads of the Ricanders." The other, fearless, replied, "Unfortunately, you won't get them." With that, he attacked. Not only him, but several other robots surrounded the man. With just a wave of his hand, he defeated them all. Meanwhile, a lance was focused, chanting a spell. "Grant me armor," and a layer of armor enveloped him. Confidently, he walked towards the man. The chubby old man and his wife were hiding behind the wall, observing. The old man said, "So this is what makes you so arrogant." But the man showed no fear, calmly standing there. When his fist neared the old man's face, he used some technique that sent him flying, crashing into the wall. Seeing this, the chubby old man became scared. Lance, after being knocked into the wall, struggled to stand up. The man said, "For someone as insignificant as you, your skills are quite admirable. With your strength, you could potentially benefit the future of this continent. But not now." With just a gesture from the man, everything shattered. He apologized for making them wait when the other 2 were in danger. Then, a lance appeared, apologizing for arriving late. He shielded his wife with his hand, visibly shaken, and angrily said, "Micah, your king is about to be killed." She replied, "Micah will handle the intruder." She then rushed to attack the man confidently, saying, "Welcome to Micah's world. I apologize if you die." Despite her threats, the man remained unfazed. When she used her technique, the man calmly walked away and said, "Excellent manipulation of gravity. That's your limit, huh?" This surprised her, and she asked, "How can you move so easily? Your body weight must be over 4 tons. She tried to remain calm and asked, "What limits?" Micah has no limits. She used all her strength to defeat the man, but unfortunately, she was the one knocked down. With just a gesture, she was sent flying. The chubby old man was shocked and scared. He knew she couldn't possibly match him in combat. "I can't die here," he said, kneeling down and bowing his head. His wife, oblivious, continued to shout, "You don't know who you're messing with. Once my husband becomes the right hand of Arona, of Alakria, the omnipotent deity, you'll see." He pulled her head down next to his, saying, "There are no holy gods in this world, only Argona." The chubby old man bowed his head, pleading, "Please, have mercy and forgive me. I'll do anything, Your Majesty." The man replied, "It seems Argona chose the wrong pawn for him." The chubby old man continued to beg, "Please, I haven't met him yet. He threatened my wife and people to force me to submit. I beg you, please forgive me." The man nodded approvingly. "Good. Release the 2 members of the Lugio from their oath." The old man was stunned and asked hesitantly, "Is there a problem?" Shaking and unable to argue, he replied, "Of course not, sir." Deep down, he thought, "I was always taught that oaths are never to be released, but my life is in danger." Out of fear of death, he followed the man's orders. Once done, he announced, "I'm done. Please, forgive me now." The man calmly said, "Apologies. I said I'll forgive you when." Enraged, the old man said, "You." But he had no chance to say more. as the man sent the elderly couple back to heaven, after executing the order to kill them. Turning away, the man said, "And so the game has begun." Back in Altho's dark prison cell, when Winsome appeared with Sylvie, Altho approached and gently stroked her head, finding her still asleep. Winsome handed Sylvie to Altho, who thanked him for it. "I didn't expect that you'd let yourself and Lady Sylvie get captured so early by the allies of the Vritra." Altho replied, "There are people whose lives I deem more important than mine." He asked, "Is it because of the fairy princess?" Altho sighed, "Not her, but because of the disciplinary committee and my closest friend." The man consoled him. "Whatever has happened is in the past. Let it pass. But what I still can't understand is why the perpetrator brought your friend along. I don't know either, but now he's here to get us out. I need to find out where they took Ilyugia. And what about Alaska? Are you going to save him?" "We know they brought him back." Altho asked, "Where?" "To Alaska." Altho sat down on the bed and placed Sylvie beside him, muttering, "Damn it, you can't even escape from this place, and you want to save him." He rested his head against his hand, saying, "I still want to follow him, hoping he's still alive so I can rescue him. But it seems he's very certain I'll be killed as soon as I step foot there. So what should I do?" "Luckily, that guy left before you arrived. His people are interested in you, so they'll let you live. But if they find out you have Lady Sylvia's original will and her daughter, even Ajuras's people might struggle to protect you." Altho asked in resignation, "So I'm at a loss. Why should I abandon my closest friend? I hoped for help from Anduin, and I know he wouldn't leave me and Sylvie here, because almost the entire council works for Veroitra, so I don't have many options here. I can't flee with my family without Luggido tracking my mana signature, and I can't hide in the monster-infested swamps without mana monsters catching me. So, Winsome, what should I do? You seem to have had plenty of time to contemplate your situation." Altho mentioned that House Rekander has close ties with Veroitra, and House Glader seems aligned with them too, but he felt they were coerced. Impressed, Winsome said, "Interesting insight, Altho." Just as they were conversing, Byron's appeared and asked to someone, "How did you get in here? Did you break in?" Winsome coldly replied, "Yes." Byron's bristled and said, "No need for more talk then," and attacked Winsome with lightning speed. Yet, Winsome remained calm and effortlessly countered Byron's powerful technique with a small move of his own. He taunted, "Kid, you can't match me. Your arrogance is too high." But Byron's refused to give up and continued trying to defeat Winsome. Eventually, Winsome declared, "That's enough," and with a gentle move, Byron's fell to the ground. At this moment, Vare also appeared and told Byron's to step back. He stood up and addressed Vare. "I don't understand how he managed to break in here." Vare coldly walked past Byron's and said, "He is a god, not a mere mortal. Can you address him with due respect like that?" Vare bowed. "I apologize, Your Excellency. Our king respectfully invites you." And so, Winsome and Altho approached the two kings and the queen, bowing in greeting. The man who had just killed the elderly couple introduced himself. "Greetings to those who do not know me. I am Alder. I'll keep it simple. Winsome and I were sent here to offer the lowly people like you a chance to survive in the upcoming war." The four of them were extremely surprised to hear this. Chaites stood up and said, "So our fears were justified. A real war is about to break out." The man continued, "I have taken the first step by eliminating the traitors. House Reynander has been removed, and their people will hear my orders. But we also decided to reconsider past mistakes that may have been made." The red-haired king interjected respectfully, "May I say something, sir? Clearly, your abilities surpass ours. The Aces could not reach the continent of Alaska and defeat the other tribe without the assistance of us lowly beings." The man shook his head and replied, "I'm afraid it's more complicated than that. Many tribes, including 3 others besides the Aces, have violated our laws. A battle on such a large scale will certainly tip the world's balance. The Aces and the other tribes have signed a treaty stating that the superior races cannot directly attack or interfere in the affairs of the lesser races." Altho interjected thoughtfully, "Isn't killing the Reynander house contrary to that treaty?" The man remained silent, and Winsome shook his head before saying, "Dickaton is currently opposing the forces commanded directly by Aona. He won't rush to break the treaty, as we only aim to level the playing field." Although still angry, continued to ask, What about the black-horned demons that have invaded our land for many years? They were here long before we knew of them. Clenching his fists, he said, one of them even killed a person in the six. Father Tessia, who was standing, then asked, although, how do you know about this? Lady Goodski, sitting nearby, raised her hand, revealing a purple-colored fragment and said, are you referring to the master of this fragment? The man closed his eyes for a few seconds, then said, kid, Winsome wasn't lying when he said you were not simple. Those creatures that have always infiltrated this continent are not Arona. They were once lowly creatures like you, but they have undergone countless experiments. Mother Tessia, worried, asked, so there are monsters that are not Arona, but can still defeat the most powerful mages of Decathlon? Can we win against them? The man replied, these monsters are not many, and although is Ariana's trump card in this war, he is not in a hurry to send them out as before, because now he knows I am here. Consider me the leader of the upcoming war. For now, I will protect this continent. Their conversation continued, but although, carrying the sleeping Sylvie, left with Winsome. Although asked, where are we going? Shouldn't we be attending the war strategy meetings? He replied, Andy can handle the preparations for the battle. We are going to visit your family. You will need to say goodbye to them. Although surprised, asked, goodbye? What do you mean goodbye? Where am I going? He turned back and said, I will take you and Lady Sylvie to the homeland of the Azures. You will be trained in Epheotus. And so, the two began their journey, walking through the night, singing and grumbling. Although said, I'm not keen on this long trek through the forest. Can't you teleport us closer to the elder's place? He replied, I cannot teleport us directly there, as it would break the protective barrier keeping your family safe from any danger. Sounds reasonable. Although said, all right, you make sense. But now, do you understand what I told you about Epheotus and Bati? There aren't any Aryans with a tribe in Epheotus. Each tribe consists of many guilds, and one guild is considered among the 8 greats, like the Vika guild of the Barcelos tribe. I still can't believe the other guilds tried to assassinate Ariana. I thought negotiation was the first and only answer to that because, for peace and all that. Winsome replied, Ariana was too dangerous for us to consider negotiation from the start. We didn't know what he had done in Alaska or what he intended to do to us, so we agreed that directly eliminating Ariana was the best way. Although questioned, but I'm still a bit confused about why Sylvia got involved in these matters and why she appeared in Decathlon. He cautiously said, although what I'm about to reveal to you must be kept secret. Only a few members of the guild know this. At that time, Lady Sylvia went with the elite division to defeat that tribe. Startled, although asked, what? And they allowed her to go. You said they had no idea what was about to happen except that Arona was very dangerous. Wasn't that a suicide mission? He replied, Lord Indra did not permit her to do anything. She disguised herself and infiltrated the army, revealing her identity only when it was too late to turn back. As for how she was captured and why she hid from us after escaping, I don't know. What happened to the Azures who went with her? Although asked. Clenching his fist, he answered seriously, it was a matter of hosts and experiments. We were completely overwhelmed by more than 10,000 hybrids. Everyone from Epheotus was either killed or captured. Arona appeared before Lord Indra to inform him that Lady Sylvia had been killed in battle. Lord Indra was ready to wage war regardless of the consequences, but the other guilds supported negotiation. This prevented the Azures from directly intervening, as the consequences would fall on this world if the 7 Azura tribes of Epheotus waged war. They wanted to shift the responsibility onto others in Epheotus, but punishing an entire race for the actions of a few was not right just to conduct such experiments. Hearing Winsome's words, although felt that they were terrible, he thought to himself that the other guilds of Epheotus must have done the same as the Arona guild, creating powerful warriors through breeding. But their conscience and pride must have stopped them. If Ariana had really been in Alaska all these years, then their numbers must have increased significantly, not to mention the imbalance between Alaska and Decathlon. Suddenly, he realized something and said, wait a minute. Then he asked, what about the 6 ancient holy relics you gave to the people of Decathlon? The man replied, they have been handed over to the people of Decathlon to create a more balanced battlefield. Battlefield. Although said, this is where I come in. How am I a pawn for the Azura guilds in this battle? Winsome explained, It will be easier for both of us if you just see it as a way to protect your friends and family. Speaking of friends and family, he suddenly remembered and asked, "Have you thought about how to break this news to your family?" His face turned sad, and he said nothing. His family was at General's place, sitting outside by the fire. General handed something to Aldo's mother, who took it and thanked the elder general. Suddenly, there was a fragrant smell. "Is there any for me?" Aldo asked. Everyone turned around, and his younger sister looked at him in surprise, saying, "No way." His father and mother were so shocked they dropped the plate they were holding. The whole family ran out, and his sister raised her hand and called out to him. They all embraced each other. His sister placed her hand on Sylvie's face and asked, "How are you doing?" Although feeling jealous, asked, "Why don't you ask how I'm doing?" His sister hugged him from behind and replied, "No matter what, you always survive and come back." His parents, standing nearby, laughed at the conversation between the siblings. But his family was surprised by something. Aldo said, "Hey Winsome, can you tone it down a bit?" Then Aldo introduced everyone to his family. "This is Winsome, the person who saved me and will be my upcoming master." General, standing behind, bowed and said, "Welcome, Master Winsome." Aldo's mother shyly said, "You must be a powerful mage. Thank you for saving my beloved son." Then she moved closer, placed her hands on Aldo's shoulders, and gently asked, "You said he will be your next master. What will he teach you?" Aldo stammered, but his mother interrupted, "Never mind, it's okay." She touched his face lovingly and said, "You've just come back from a long journey. Why don't you go take a bath and have some dinner first?" And so the family joyfully gathered for dinner together. However, their happiness was interrupted by Winsome's clearing his throat. Aldo looked at him and then put down the plate he was holding. "Elder Rena, may I speak with my parents in private?" The three of them went outside. His father looked back and saw Winsome watching them, while General was smiling happily and his sister was playing with Sylvie, saying, "Come on, you can eat it," and went to another room. His father slowly sat down and said, "Your master should join us too, right?" His mother took his hand and asked, "Dear, are you worried about us?" Although gloomily said, "I know I have caused you a lot of trouble, but there is something I must do. I will tell you all about it. But before I begin, there is something I have been pondering for a long time whether to tell you or not." He sighed and continued, "Since I came to this world." His mother, surprised, said, "What? Since you came to this world? You mean when you were born?" He looked at his mother and replied, "Sort of, but not exactly, Mom. You don't understand what I mean." Although then told his parents, "Please trust me. I remember more than anyone else the moment I was born. At that moment, I was teleported and reincarnated. Something happened, and I was taken away from my world and brought to this one." His father couldn't believe what he was hearing and said, Wait a minute, son. Say that again." His mother knelt on the ground, placed her warm hands on her son's face, and anxiously asked, "Although, what are you saying? Another world? Are you all right? Where did this idea come from? Did your master tell you this?" He took her wrists and said, "No, Mom. My master doesn't know about this. No one but you and Dad know about this. I don't even know what to call this phenomenon. I've thought about it for a long time. I guess it's something like reincarnation." His mother, worried, asked, "Did something happen to you when they took you away? Did they do something to you? Come here, let me try to heal you." His father, sitting calmly, said, "Honey, let the boy speak." His mother looked at his father with immense worry. During that conversation, Aldo described to them my world, at least the part I can remember, my role there, and the relationships in detail, so they wouldn't misunderstand that I was making it up. Throughout this, my parents mostly sat in silence. Occasionally, my father asked a few questions, but his face remained expressionless. My mother, however, was clearly in shock. Her face was pale, and her hands and feet trembled more as I continued my story. I didn't know how much time had passed, but it must have been a few hours until my father said, "So, that war, that magical talent of yours." "Yes, Dad," Aldo said. "The internal energy system in my old world is quite similar to the mana system in this one. And about that war, you've understood correctly." His mother, who had been crying with her head down, suddenly laughed. "Haha, Mother understands. This is all a joke, right?" Seeing his wife like this, Aldo's father gently patted her back to comfort her. "Here, oh, my son almost fooled us, didn't he?" Reynold's whole body trembled as she grasped her son's hand and said, "This is a joke, right? Although, tell me this is just a cruel joke." Tears fell onto her pale face from anxiety, and she said, "You can't possibly be some dead king transported into the unborn mind of my child, can you? Right?" Although avoided his mother's gaze, looked down, and replied, "I don't know exactly how it happened, but I'm not joking, Mom." He sat down on the chair, remembering the time when their family was playing joyfully together after his son was born. Whenever he returned home from a journey, his family welcomed him back. Reynold lifted his son up and said, "Is your hair the only thing that grows long?" Although laughed playfully, grabbing his father's beard and saying, "Your beard too, Dad. It's even thicker than before. Are you using it to hide your wrinkles?" Or how worried she was every time he got hurt. She was so shocked by what she had heard that she cried out loud, clutching her head, saying, No, this isn't true. Ray, don't tell me you believe this. Our son is sick. He must have gone through something. It must be that." Reynold hugged his wife to comfort her and said, "Honey," as although stood up and went outside. As he stepped out, he playfully interacted with his sister. Their father opened the door and said, "Ellie, could you go sit beside your mother in the tent?" She happily handed the sleeping Sylvie to him and said, "Here," then got up and left, turning back to ask, "Feeling better, big brother?" As she neared the tent, she suddenly stopped, ran back to hug him. He held her close, patted her head, and said, "It seems now you are the one comforting me." She looked up at him with bright, innocent eyes and said, "I won't ask anything if you have to go far again, as long as you always come home." Then she went inside to be with their mother, while Reynold and although walked through the tunnel. Reynold, looking down, sadly informed him, "Your mother is asleep now." Although asked about her condition, "Is she all right?" She was quite shocked, his father replied. After a few seconds of silence, although asked, "So you and Mom believe me?" Reynold, trying to remain calm, said, "You have no reason to deceive us." Looking up, he continued, "Besides, everything makes sense now. Your early awakening as an extraordinary warrior and mage, it all fits." Although approached his father, "Dad, are you okay?" Maybe at this point he couldn't stay calm anymore. He put his hand on his chest and said, "Me? Of course not. This isn't something easy to accept. Are you although or anyone else? Are all the memories our family has together fake? Have you been pretending to be the son we always wanted?" He clutched his head and asked, "How should I treat you now, when you're older than me? Yet now you're my 13-year-old son. Your mother has raised an infant, believing she was the mother of a middle-aged man thinking he was her own son." He angrily punched the rock wall beside him, causing his hand to bleed. "I'm sorry," he said, "but are you really our son? Or did you take over the body of the unborn child that should have been our son when you reincarnated? What really happened to you?" Although stood in silence, unsure of what to say, Reynold, his hand bleeding heavily, put his injured hand to his forehead and stammered, "I didn't mean that. Right now, I'm very confused." Although, with sadness in his eyes, said, "You're right, Reynold. As I said earlier, I don't know why this happened. Maybe I took the place of the child that could have been yours, but I don't know how the process brought me here. I didn't want to hide the truth from you, but now I don't know if I made the right choice. I've wanted to tell you for a long time, but never had the courage. I wanted to say this before I left." His father, surprised, asked, "Leave? Where are you going?" "Yes, given the current situation, it might be better if we stayed apart for a while." "And how long will you be gone?" "At least a few years." His father looked down, sorrowful, and said, "That long?" Although turned and started walking away, saying, "You know, I never had any memories of a family in my old world. Growing up without anyone truly loving me made me an unbeatable warrior but a terrible person. Since coming to this world, human later Ellie taught me something I had never known. I may not be the strongest warrior or wizard in this world, but now I'm a much better person than I was in my previous life." With tears welling up in his eyes, he continued, "I'm sorry for hurting you both. Thank you for teaching me to be a better person, and thank you for loving me as your son." Both of them cried a lot, and although walked toward where Winsome was waiting for him. Winsome asked, "I see you've resolved your matters. Are you ready?" Although picked up Sylvie and said, "Yes, let's go." The elder general said, "Wait, you're not going to say goodbye to your family?" Although shook his head, "No need. I've settled everything I needed to hear." He bowed and thanked her. "Please take care of them for me." She pulled him back and said, "Although that look of fear on your face doesn't suit someone with a kind heart like yours, I'm only just beginning to understand the weight of the battles you'll face. But don't fall back into old ways. You know better than anyone that the deeper you fall into that abyss, the harder it is to climb out." She released him and said, "Now go. I'll take care of things here." Winsome sat down, took out a round object, and dripped his blood into it. Together, they traveled to another place. On the way, although asked, "Hey, Winsome, does my face look strange?" he replied, "Your face reminds me of the Azura's warriors. They were skilled fighters who learned to hide their emotions to be most effective in battle. It's a very useful technique. Are you sure you've handled everything here?" Although glanced back at the house and said, "Yes, I'm ready." Reynold slowly walked through the dungeon. Earlier, he had a conversation with Alpha, who believed that Reynold hated what had happened. Part of me wished I had told Alvo that it was all right, that the kid was still family. But a larger part of me, the part that I despise, wished the kid had never told us. I knew from a young age that Alpha was different, perhaps too difficult for me to accept, as it damaged my pride, my selfish pride, which maybe was just that. I nurtured a genius for 1,000 years, with signs always present, from the kid's strange behavior from a very young age, to his mastery of swordsmanship, his incomprehensible skill as a mage. He sat down next to General, who said he had left. He replied that I knew. She said, "I was afraid of the day he'd tell you too," and he was surprised. She asked, "Did you know, old man?" She said she had seen a lot, but only the kid could use half of this old brain to guess what his future would be like. "It's not the kid," she said, "but to me he's still a kid, like you're a kid to me. I always thought it was funny, the prejudices of everyone about age and intelligence. The older you are, the wiser and the more logical you think. Add those two together, and an older, smarter person would be a cold-blooded calculator. Do you agree or not?" She put the object on her hand down on the table, and then leaned in again and said to Reynold, "Don't you think I'm like that?" Reynold stuttered and said, "Of course not, but I don't understand how that relates to Althal." She said, "Didn't you wish Althal hadn't spoken? That you would be happier not knowing who that kid really is? So you were wondering why he told you? Right, because the heart is always the biggest enemy of the brain. In fact, for men, the brain's most formidable enemy is something else, as we said. The emotions of the heart are always in conflict with things like reason, effectiveness, and practicality. Any things that are logical." She comforted him, saying that it was what made us hurt, or even killed. But we can't do anything else that makes us weaker when we're alone, but stronger when we're in a group. Reynold asked, "So, although acted more on emotions than logical thinking when he told us about this?" She shook her head and laughed. "Haha, how do we know what he was thinking?" She looked up and continued, "But we know one thing. We knew that boy when he was just a child in this world, and he has shared many stories since then." Standing up and stretching, she said, "Perhaps this is a significant step he must take to completely break free from the shells that used to be his safe and comfortable refuge." She handed him the white cloth bag prepared for the rope and said, "Hold this to help me prepare some food for his wife. Althal's teacher told me that it's a gift for the Lemon family." He took it and said, "A gift for you," and immediately a bear emerged from it. His daughter standing behind exclaimed, "Oh, how cute, Dad! What is it? Can we keep it?" Her father turned and chuckled. "You startled me there, unsure if it was a good idea." He pondered, "I once dreamed of riding a mighty mana beast into battle. It would be good if my daughter had a beast to protect her." The daughter looked at him, then picked up the bear and cheerfully said, "Here, I'll call you Boo." Her father standing beside her wondered, "Why Boo?" The daughter explained, "Because of the 2 black dots on its face that make it look perpetually grumpy." She hugged it close, then informed her father, "That's right, Mom and Dad are awake now." Upon hearing this, he immediately went to see his wife. After a nap, "Are you feeling better?" he asked her as she sat in her chair. He gently embraced her and said, "Just a few hours." She sadly asked, "Where did Althal go? Why did he leave?" She questioned herself, "Am I a bad person?" Her husband comforted her, "No. Why would you think that? I told Althal he was crazy. I didn't mean it." She leaned on his shoulder and wept. He reassured her, "It's normal," but he couldn't believe how easily one could accept the evil that had been spoken to them. Trembling, she asked, "Am I repulsive?" When she suspected whether Althal could be our son. He was startled into silence, but inside he thought, I want to tell her no, but how can I when I feel disgusted with myself for sharing the same thoughts as her? Alice was the one who bore and gave birth to our child after more than 9 months. She fed, nurtured, and cared for him when he was sick and taught him everything about this world. Now, everything she knows about that child has turned out to be a lie. I need to be strong. I need to be someone my wife can rely on. I'm sorry, he said, hugging his wife. You have nothing to feel sorry for. We just need time to sort out our emotions. Although knew this, and that's why he told us before he left. She asked how long he would be gone. He said a few years. I understand, she replied. I wonder what our son would be like if he hadn't been replaced by Althal. He was shocked and said, Alice, please don't say that. Don't ask such questions. She continued, would he be brave and outgoing like you, or perhaps a bit cautious and shy like me? He looked at his wife with tears in his eyes and said, my love, please. Althal is, she cut him off. Althal is our son. Why can't you see that? We've been talking all this time, and not once have we mentioned that Althal is our son. Right now, like me, you can't confidently say Althal is our son. I hope this will change when we see him again. But it doesn't change the fact that we've treated him as family for over 13 years. We've laughed, fought, celebrated, and cried together. Aren't these the things that brought us closer? Not the blood in our veins or our past. It's because of what we've been through together. Remember when Althal risked his life to save me on our way to this sea? He wouldn't have done that if he didn't care about you. He looked at her lovingly and said, you are not a bad person. We just need time to think things through. She wiped her eyes and said, don't look at me. I must look terrible now. But she was startled as her husband held her wrist, kissed her forehead, and said, you are very beautiful. The romantic atmosphere was interrupted when their daughter called her mother to come and see something. Boo, she asked her daughter. Which Boo are you calling? Her husband cheerfully said, I'll explain later. After her husband's encouraging words, she seemed more cheerful, no longer crying. The two embraced happily in a place with a beautiful clear blue sky and a garden of blooming cherry blossoms. Pink petals mingled under the golden sunlight. Althal spoke up. This is the land of the gods, isn't it? It's beautiful. Winsome said, welcome to Epheotus, or more precisely, the castle of the Indra clan. Althal, amazed, slowly followed Winsome to a door. Although asked, aren't there any guards or sentries? Winsome replied, they have been watching us since we crossed the bridge. Come on, we shouldn't keep Lord Indra waiting. They approached a magnificent castle. Althal thought to himself, so this is Sylvia's home. He asked, is there anything I should know before meeting this lord, Sylvia's grandfather? Winsome answered, unfortunately, I don't know what will happen either, as this situation is very unusual. They entered and reached a door where two people dressed in white said, Elder Winsome, you finally brought the human boy here. Is it appropriate for a human child to hold the princess like that? Winsome replied, stop bickering. They have already formed a contract. Now, will you let us in or not? The two people opened the door for Winsome and Althal to enter. Behind the door, a man was sitting on a chair. Winsome respectfully bowed, my lord. Stand up, said Lord Indra. Althal thought, so this is Lord Indra. I can't sense. But suddenly his body convulsed with pain. It felt like it was burning, so much so that he collapsed to the ground. The Lord sighed, then lifted Sylvia, who had been in Althal's arms, and she suddenly appeared in the Lord's arms. Althal looked at him in confusion, thinking, how can he? The Lord said, did I permit you to hold my granddaughter? I don't see you training her. Her mana level is shamefully low, and looking at her current hibernating state, it seems you've overworked her. Althal clenched his fists in anger, but couldn't do anything. Winsome quickly apologized to the Lord. I should have trained Princess Sylvie while I was in Detention. If you wish, I can train her now. The Lord replied, no need. I will personally take care of Sylvie. He touched Sylvie's forehead with his index finger, startling her awake. She looked at him, and then down at her father, asking, Father, where am I? We are in a very distant place, Sylvie. How you feel? She yawned and said, I'm sleepy. Can I sleep some more? He smiled and said, of course, you can rest. Althal then addressed the Lord. Lord, Elder Winsome explained what you need from me, but he hasn't told me exactly why you brought me here. If it is simply for training, wouldn't the secluded dungeon in Detention be more suitable? Why bring me to the land of the gods? The Lord replied, I believe you are the missing piece to help us fight against Aona and his growing army. I think you understand the mutual benefits of winning the upcoming battle. It would be most beneficial to have a few experts assist Winsome in training you here. Consider it an honor, as only the most talented young generations receive the training you are about to undergo. Altho asked, How do you know when that battle will occur? How much time do we have left? The Lord replied, That's my concern. Focus on your training, and I will notify Winsome when it's time for you to return to your homeland. He then had 2 women use a cloth to cradle the sleeping Sylvie. Altho, panicked, asked, Wait, what about Sylvie? The Lord responded, She will stay with me until her training is complete. When will I be able to see Sylvie? Altho asked, but Winsome pulled him away, saying, Let's go. Altho could only helplessly look back at Sylvie one last time before leaving in despair. They walked out into the cherry blossom garden. Although said to Winsome, I still don't understand the purpose of this meeting. I can endure being criticized by Lord Indra, but I wasn't prepared to be separated from Sylvie. He was silent for a moment before replying. The relationship between you and the Asherus clan can be considered a reluctant concession. That's why our Lord chose a private meeting like this. The fact that we had no choice but to rely on a lesser being has hurt our pride. But don't worry, both you and Princess Sylvie are very important to us. Altho replied, It seems this means that Lord Indra's words about a necessary peace for the upcoming battle are true. Winsome grabbed his hand and said, We've arrived, right? Didn't we walk for hours just to train here? Winsome warned him to hold on tight, and suddenly Altho was propelled forward and arrived at a cave. Winsome said, It's good to see you again. A muscular man emerged from the shadows and asked, You must be the human Altho, right? Winsome replied, Altho, this is my good friend Cordri. He is a warrior like Andia. Altho said, It's a pleasure to meet you. The man asked Winsome, Did the Lord really grant you the Ether Orb? Yes, Winsome replied, taking out the orb. The man said, The Lord is indeed investing a lot in this human. Standing there confused, Altho asked, What is the Ether Orb? The man explained, That orb will be very useful for your training. We will borrow the power of the dragon race to influence R, a powerful element that exists everywhere and affects the entire universe. The orb can be used to separate the body from the soul and manipulate time. Although asked, I'm sorry, what? Winsome said, Along with the orb, the Lord has allowed us to use his private training grounds. They walked past a pond, and Winsome held out the orb, saying, The R liquid in this pond will help accelerate your training and heal any injuries you sustain during it. As Altho entered the pond, he exclaimed, Wait, what is happening? Winsome laughed and said, You'll see soon enough. Altho remembered his past life at the academy. In my previous life, we had to undergo 8 hours of combat training, followed by 10 hours of meditation, to cultivate our mental fortitude. It can't be denied that the training had its flaws. The only useful information the instructors taught us were the vital points of the human body, but their techniques were brutal and senseless attempts to inflict damage. Nevertheless, I strictly adhered to the trainer's regimen and tried to attend all the classes. Before my mindset was fully formed, I was repeatedly defeated by my classmates for hours on end. It's funny how memories from the past easily resurface when we're placed in similar situations. Altho and Cordri were training on a vast, lush green field. He was quite exhausted, and his body was covered in numerous injuries. He had just fallen to the ground, eyes closed, when he suddenly opened them in shock to see Cordri preparing to punch him in the face. He couldn't dodge in time and got punched in the arm, causing him to cry out in pain. Despite the intense pain, his strong willpower helped him stand up again. The trainer was ready to attack, and Altho was in a defensive stance when the trainer said, That's enough. The two of them went to the pond for Altho to heal his injuries. After a while, his wounds improved significantly. He told the trainer, I can continue. After a training session with Altho, Cordri said to Winsome, The human kid has impressive willpower. How long did it take this time? Winsome replied, About 5 minutes out here, so around an hour for us in there. Winsome said to Altho, The more you're expelled from the spirit realm, the less time you have to train. Even though time passes more slowly in there, you won't be ready for the upcoming battle if you keep getting expelled every few minutes. Altho, tired and running a hand through his hair, said, "Don't blame me, blame your friend here. He keeps killing me every few minutes." Cordri said, "I'm only using techniques you can handle. Even the young Sora, who haven't died as many times as you, have to deal with this pressure. You're handling the feeling of impending death quite well." Altho looked at him and said, "Good compliment." Then he walked away and said, "Let's continue." And so they continued their training. It had been over a week since Altho began this torturous training regimen. Here he learned that this was Lord Indra's personal training ground. When they started, Winsome explained that Altho would face Cordri in a soul state, aided by the R-sphere, which significantly reduced the pain Altho felt when nearing death. This made Altho wonder just how painful it would be in his physical state, considering the time spent eating, sleeping, and resting in the real world after dying multiple times in the spirit realm. Over the course of several months in this grassy field, with a calm and patient Cordri, Altho experienced his first training in the spirit realm. Initially, he was killed by the first blow without reacting in time. Cordri's attacks were always the same, but after a few weeks, Altho managed to narrowly avoid them. Cordri reassured him to trust in his body. Altho only needed to believe he could do it. His body was the only thing that wouldn't disappoint him. Admitting it was embarrassing, Altho acknowledged the power gap between them. As the training progressed, Altho seemed to improve. Cordri praised him, noting that he lasted longer than usual and encouraged him not to despair despite the physical pain he endured. Cordri felt Altho had figured out how to avoid being killed and suggested resting until his soul state recovered. Though Altho still had injuries, they were much milder than before. Cordri informed him they should pause the training for a while. Altho stood up, rubbing his neck, and asked, "Are you saying I'm not learning fast enough?" Cordri shook his head and replied, "No, your ability to grasp and learn is actually quite formidable. It's because of your stubbornness. I was afraid you would collapse if we continued at this pace." Altho expressed his discouragement, questioning why the world within the sphere wouldn't prevent his death. Moreover, he noted that his soul state was recovering rapidly. As long as Cordri didn't kill him instantly, he would be fine, right? However, Cordri intervened, pointing out that he was referring to Altho's physical injuries here. He emphasized that experiencing repeated deaths changed the nature of pain. It no longer signaled the end, but rather heralded a level of agony that even Soras found terrifying. Such trauma would impede the creation of warriors that Cordri aimed to train. When discussing this level of pain, Cordri warned that if endured too frequently, Altho's body would instinctively seek ways to save itself, whether he wanted it to or not. Enduring just enough pain would become his most reliable sword and shield. Altho stood up, insisting he was fine. But suddenly he turned pale, and Cordri delivered a strong punch to his abdomen, causing blood to spill from his mouth, the impact reaching through to the other side of his body. Cordri told Altho that he possessed other experiences and instincts compared to most people. Despite there being much for him to learn and much he would have to forget, Cordri comforted him by saying he would mold him into an unparalleled warrior, not just among the lesser beings, but also among the Azuras. After withdrawing his hand from Altho's chest, he began to tremble. Despite the mortal wound on his chest, he felt excited. He was exhilarated by training with skilled instructors and preparing for the upcoming battle, or maybe it was a mix of all three. Lying on the green grass, he looked up at the sky and continued to think. He felt that Cordri emerged from the shadows, wielding the sword. Altho sensed and exclaimed, "He's a monster, a true predator." He stated, "He told me to come here." Altho prepared to leave, and the two began training. More than a month has passed in the outside world, meaning more than a year has passed in here. Altho attacked while talking. "Your movements are improving. Even when I use aura to suppress you, you're able to dodge my moves this time. You haven't gotten hurt, but you are quite tired." After finishing the training, he lay down on the grass and panted heavily. He tiredly asked, "How long did I last this time?" "With the king's power, you are making progress," Altho replied, then asked, "Not long enough, right? Don't be too fixated on it. Let's do it again. This time, we won't use weapons. I know you prefer fighting with a sword, and I must say it's a good sword. But for wizards, close combat is still the most flexible way to fight. For the upcoming battle, I need to mold your bones. develop your muscles, and train your mind to its limit so that you can become the knight who can protect your continent and those you love. Your performance in close combat training is very impressive, but your fighting style is more suited to dueling a single opponent. Since the Azurus tribe is not allowed to participate in this battle, their descendants, the hybrids, will become their strongest force. To prepare for the scenario where you are surrounded by enemies with Ashura's blood running through their veins, I am restricting your use of mana to help you learn to use it precisely. Fighting with enhanced physical strength using mana accurately and appropriately will be the most effective and reliable way to take down enemies. Altho was ready and said, I understand. The first lesson I taught you was how to survive, how to fight and dodge at a faster speed. Next was learning how to fight under great pressure, fighting under the influence of King's power, or killing intent as you call it. It had significantly increased your endurance over the past few months. But now, the third point to pay attention to is your vision, which is too narrow. They continued their training while exchanging thoughts. Cordri said, I must say, that was a beautiful punch. Although, how much strength do you need to deliver such a powerful punch? Do you think you can do it in 2 to 3 days? Speaking politely and knowing how to distribute mana properly in a long battle is very important, and it's the same with your body. Mana is like a sword. It's a tool for you to control and use. Your body is the foundation that unifies all the tools together to create a true warrior. Defend yourself with mana de ara, I permit it. After a while of training, the two returned to the healing pond. Suddenly, Cordri said, Ah, there you are. Someone came and talked to him, saying, I'm sorry for being late, master. He asked, Who is this child? Cordri replied, Altho, I want you to meet Kenji, your new training partner. Kenji was surprised and asked, Training partner? Master, I thought you asked me to come here, because I finally have the chance for personal training. He said, Tashi, you will receive training when you fight with Altho. Now come here so we can start. Kenji asked, Master, what will I gain from training with this inferior being? Altho has been specially trained by me. You have been given the honor of training with the rare R orb, and you still dare to complain. Kenji shook his head and said, No, Master. I just think it's not worth your time to train a human while there are many disciples waiting for your guidance. He sighed and turned to Altho, saying people from that tribe have different ways of using mana to increase the range of their attacks. Kenji has been trained in the ways of the Ace Guild. The three of them sat down, and Cordri said, By understanding the enemy's location, weight distribution, and strength, we can know how much force to use for an appropriate counterattack. This way, we will use less energy to break their attacks and maintain strength when we launch our attacks. I've only given you a little information about it, Altho, but I want you to practice it by fighting with Kenji. Use all your strength to fight with Altho without worrying about serious injury or death here. Although you are not allowed to use mana at all. You can only dodge and avoid. You can only attack by grappling your opponent. Kenji was surprised and asked, Master, this is unreasonable. Aren't you usually the one who restricts me from using mana instead of the humans? Kenji, I am tired of hearing you complain. Do you doubt me? He bowed his head and hesitated, saying, Of course not, Master. Then let's begin. They entered the green field for training. As soon as they entered, both of them immediately started fighting. Cordri stood outside observing and saw that Kenji, despite being only 7 years old, had shown extraordinary talent from the beginning, enough to catch the attention of the elders in the guild. But after just a few days, and with all the restrictions, Altho was gradually catching up with Kenji. His footwork, dodging, and movements became faster and more precise, as if his body was instinctively eliminating unnecessary motions. He was surprised and wondered how it was possible. How many people had he fought to gain such superior observational skills? During the years, he had been both a warrior and a master. He had trained many disciples who later became top figures in the guild. But training this kid, Altho gave him a feeling he had never felt before. Excitement, reverence, and pride continuously surged within him. These were feelings he couldn't even sense from himself. It was unpredictable what he would become, and the desire to find out was very thrilling. If he had been born as an Asherah's, he would have become an outstanding member, even within the ranks holding supreme power. However, the gods had arranged for him to be a sacrificial pawn, used until he was no longer of value. It was truly regrettable. Previously, Cordri had his disciples train with Altho, while observing the fight and thinking to himself, that punch, his hand swung too far. Then just ducked down to dodge and step forward. That kick, her leg is too high, losing balance. Take advantage of that. The left hook, swung too early, lean back a bit. A kick to the face. Another kick aimed at the ribs. Their attacks are getting more accurate. Duck to avoid the kick to the head, and block the kick to the ribs. Use the force from the kick to spring out of that disadvantageous position. He shouted, "Time's up." After the fight, Altho grinned while the three disciples were either holding their heads and complaining, "Almost got him," or wiping sweat and saying, "Damn it," or the last one, dissatisfied, went to complain to the master. "If you had given us even one more minute, we could have taken him down." He said, "Enough. 4 against 1 and you still dare to complain, when you couldn't even land a single hit on Altho. What do you think, Altho?" He smiled and said, "I've never felt better." He was about to throw a light punch, but it was easily blocked. Approximately 4 months had passed in the outside world, meaning that because of that orb, I had been training in this spiritual realm for nearly 4 years. Although physically my body had barely matured, under Cordri's guidance, my muscles and core levels had advanced by several years. My 14th birthday had just passed, and like every other day, I spent it honing my body, reflexes, and combat acuity. Cordri had also sharpened my ability to use mana for combat support, but he hadn't taught me any new concepts. I didn't know if it was due to the intrinsic differences between humans and Asuya, or if he was unwilling or unable to teach the mana techniques of their tribe to outsiders. I completely trusted Cordri, and absorbed everything he taught me. Altho stood next to Winom, facing Cordri and his disciples. Altho thanked them again. "Thank you, everyone, for helping me with my training." Altho called out to Cordri, "Master, thank you very much for guiding me these pastimes." He responded, "Ha. This has been beneficial for me too." Altho stretched and asked, "What do we need to learn in the next phase?" Altho looked at Winom and Cordri, asking, "Is something wrong?" Winom replied, "No, we'll start the next phase soon. It's just that." Cordri interrupted Winom and said, "It's just that you haven't changed at all." Altho asked in surprise, "What do you mean by no change?" "My supreme core has advanced to the next level of light gold, and is about to reach the peak level," Altho said. Winom looked at him and said, "Altho, training with mana blocks can bring tremendous benefits, but it is absolutely prohibited for use with children over a long period. The time difference between the two worlds can cause mental disorders if one's mind is not fully developed." Cordri continued from where Winom left off. "Even the Lord and I were very hesitant to use it on you, but this ongoing war left us with no other choice." Winom said, "But your manner of speaking, your demeanor, your mind, has not changed at all from when you started training. Your mind should have aged by 3 years during your training here, but you haven't shown any of the changes that a normal child would." Altho explained, "I've had to act older than my age and have a mature mindset for most of my life. I've gotten used to presenting myself this way, and becoming a professor at the academy, teaching students my age, only reinforced it." Winom said, "Well, that's good for us and for your training." Winom thanked Cordri again for his help. "No one else, even in Asuya, can match your knowledge of close combat." Cordri replied, "No need to thank me. If Altho wants a chance to defeat those bastards, he must train well." He placed a hand on Altho's shoulder and advised, "Remember that the divine mages are trained by the Asuya. The mana techniques on that continent are far more advanced than what we have here in Detention. Honestly, it's frustrating to be so constrained like this. But breaking the treaty could lead to a war that would destroy this world. If you don't want that to happen, you and your comrades must fight." Winom, holding the letter, caught Altho's attention while he was bowing to Cordri. The contents of the letter shocked him. Altho and Winom walked through the peach garden. Altho, with a charming expression, looked down and asked, "So the information provided to us by that person, the one named Good Sky, is about the so-called 4 death gods. Should I consider them my targets?" According to the letter, we know that each of the 4 death gods has a close servant, a close aide, and direct subordinates. Each one can easily charge into battle, and there are 4 others with ranks even higher than those subordinates. We deduced this from the horn fragments collected from the dungeon where Alex was killed. But Goodski also confirmed that we are dealing with a purebird with a rank equivalent to those servants. He stopped and said, "Wait a minute. I thought Commander Goodski was bound by an oath not to disclose any information." Althal shook his head, thinking, "So the one who killed Lance is that so-called servant, not a death god. The scale of the upcoming war will see both continents sending millions of soldiers to fight in the name of their lands. Decadent and my family are still safe, but with the power of those vile beings, how long will that last? At least now I have a target, some enemies to deal with. That's my purpose for this training." Winsome introduced the next training location. Althal, feeling weary, said, as expected. Winsome asked, "Do you still remember what I said about the next training phase?" Althal replied, "Aside from the items in this bag, I am not allowed to use anything else. Nor can I use high-level mana techniques." "That's right, and you understand what you need to do to complete your mission, correct? The skin of a carnivorous squirrel, the inner core of a silver leopard, and the claws of a bear. With these items, how will I be able to prove that I am ready to learn more about the legacies Sylvia left for me?" Winsome added, "Oh, and one more thing. You must wear this at all times. When you have collected all the listed items, break this bell to inform me. Also, I advise you to collect them in the correct order." Althal, irritated, said, "You know, I'm starting to doubt your training methods." They had reached the next training location. Winsome had given him a task with a bunch of requirements. Althal remembered the instructions and set off to complete his mission.